Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. This one yet again based on one of your questions. This one time, one of my beloved Lumberjack Cryptids. You know how much I love talking about those particular cryptids. In fact, I have a playlist that I have set just for them, and I'll include the link for below in case you ever wanted to catch up on all the other Lumberjack Cryptids that I've talked about in the past. But this one is a doozy, definitely a very strange and bizarre one that was found sometime in the 19th, maybe even early 20th centuries here in the US. So lots of great information to share. I'll go ahead and I'll post that here. In fact, you're looking at a representation of it now. Definitely stands out, no, when it comes to this particular Lumberjack cryptid, and it has a very unique name. It's known as the Rubberado. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating and interesting info associated with this very unique cryptid. So what is this Rubberado? Well, again, it's a lumberjack cryptid that was found sometime in the 19th, 20th centuries, like if you want to go to the early part of the 20th century, in specific parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota. So if you happen to be in those states, who knows, you may have a good chance of coming across this very, very interesting cryptid. And as always, anything involving lumberjack tales, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. There are definitely some kind of cryptids that are very outlandish, like they have some very unique traits associated with them. Who knows if some of these are truly real or if they were just made up as tall tales, like a lot of things were back then in the 19th century in the western frontiers. But at least with this information, I'll just always present it as is, and it's up for yourself to decide afterward. So as far as the physical characteristics of this cryptid, it definitely has some very, very unique ones. Here's essentially how it is. This is a creature that was described as looking like a porcupine. It even has the spines and then other kinds of skins associated with porcupines, probably even around the same size of a porcupine as well, except for one big difference. Its skin was extremely rubbery. In fact, its flesh was considered very, very rubbery, and it seemed to be able to inflate itself almost like a balloon using that flexible type skin. Already, doesn't it stand out from many other cryptids that are out there? I mean, I guess you could have certain fishes that are out there in the sea that also blow up in a certain manner, but this cryptid does it for one specific reason. It moved utilizing its inflated stance. So essentially, it would inflate itself, and then just like a beach ball, that's how it would bounce around. It would bounce across the lands found there in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Imagine that. Imagine seeing this cryptid bouncing around somewhere in those places, and when you did so, that's when you knew you were looking at this particular creature. Not only that, but you could actually get a good heads up because you could hear its laughter as it bounced. That's right. Apparently every single time it bounced on the ground, it created a laugh. I don't know if this was necessarily the cryptid itself laughing or if it was an inadvertent type sound associated from whatever, I guess, gas or whatever else it was using within its body to make itself inflate. But there it was, almost happily bouncing about in those areas there in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So again, good heads up if you ever saw what looked like a beach ball somewhere in the far distance just moving about. That's essentially what you're looking at here, a Rubberado, especially if you happen to hear that type of laughter. And then as far as other characteristics associated with it, not only was its flesh considered very rubbery, but it was bulletproof. It was so rubbery that, in fact, it seemed to bounce bullets off anytime someone fired on it. Very, very protective, when it comes to that, especially, let's say, if it came across some kind of hunters or others that were trying to take it as a prize, you would pretty much have to catch it another way as opposed to, let's say, just shooting it. On top of that, the other thing that stood out is its striped skin. Apparently, it was considered almost black and white when it came to its stripes, which is very unique. It's almost like a zebra of sorts. And it's there again bouncing around, and you probably have to imagine that it's also spinning in a certain manner when it's doing these bounces, so it almost creates almost a hypnotized effect associated with it. But eventually some people did catch it, because here's how another interesting part takes place with the Rubberado. It's a delicacy. People back then apparently ate this creature, but you had to do so in a very specific fashion. In fact, if you ate it, it almost made it seem like if you ate it fresh. like in other words, rare. Don't cook it, in other words. Just eat it in a certain manner where it's still kind of fresh. If you did so, then it's very, very delicate. However, if you cooked it, then apparently its flesh became inedible. Maybe it just became a very horrible taste, or something else happened to the flesh altogether. But either way, though, when you cooked it, then it was gone. No longer was that delicacy associated with its taste. But if you apparently prepared it in a slow stew, which is another way to get around a particular way of cooking it, then you'll be fine. Apparently the taste is still there, and you're not going to have like that rare taste that others don't like altogether. Like in my case, whenever I eat a burger, I have to have it cooked well done. Like I don't do anything as far as like the rare circumstances involving meat. No, nothing like that. In my case, definitely has to be cooked. So maybe that's the case here as well for those that lived back then that were trying to cook the Rubberado. As long as you did it in form of a stew, then you'll be perfectly fine. On top of that too, you had to also be very, very careful when you ate it, because its after effects could actually impart on yourself. This was the craziest part of it. This is again where you gotta kind of take a little bit of grain of salt when you talk about these lumberjack cryptids. Apparently, when you consumed this Rubberado or parts of it, you in turn will find yourself bouncing around and laughing for a couple of days afterward. In fact, even the information I was reading almost made it seem like you would also inflate a little bit, like your body in turn would become a little bit more gaseous, if you could call it that. And then when that happened, you would find yourself almost in a jubilant mode as you're bouncing across certain parts of your home or other parts of work or wherever you're going. And that's essentially where you had these effects from the Rubberado, and then naturally they would just fall off on their own. So give it a couple of days, and then eventually this effect from the Rubberado would be completely gone. But you could probably have others know that you ate part of a Rubberado whenever you're having this happen to you. It's kind of hard to hide that fact. No, when you're at work and all of a sudden you're laughing and bouncing around, and there's a good chance that people will say, hey, this guy must have actually eaten some parts of a Rubberado. Again, take that with a huge grain of salt, but that's at least the information that was associated with this very, very unique creature. As far as where it's located now, who knows? It seems to have died off sometime in the past, there in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Or maybe it moved on to other parts of the country, more remote parts, that it's remained, like, let's say, very, very hidden, bouncing away in some of those remote parts. But either way, nobody has seen any type of encounters associated with it today. So those of you that live in those states, if you have a chance and you see this creature, or more importantly, you hear it in certain locations, then you'll have a good indication of having the Rubberado there with you. And otherwise, if you happen to see it in other parts of the U.S., then be on the lookout. Then you'll have a chance of catching or even seeing this particular creature, this very, very fascinating lumberjack creature. I don't recommend anyone catching it to eating it, not just because of the side effects, but considering how unique and how fascinating this creature is. This would definitely be something that you would want to keep around and show off, and let's say put it in a museum or put it someplace else that show that this lumberjack cryptid truly exists because of its very, very unique traits. I mean, definitely stands out on its own compared to some of the other past lumberjack cryptids. In fact, I was thinking it reminded me of the hoop snake. The snake, the one that bites its own tail and then moves around in a hula hoop fashion towards one area to another, or one of my other ones, the sly rock bolter, that jumps down from a mountain all of a sudden, almost as quick as a snake, if you will, and then bites and then grabs its prey and then moves back up. Those are other cryptids that are again tied to stuff involving lumberjacks, and those are within some of my playlists. So that's what reminded me here when I was reading some of the information associated with the Rubberado. But if anybody has anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. How about that? Anybody from the Wisconsin area or the Minnesota area knows more information tied to this very, very unique cryptid, then please, I would love to hear what your comments are there too. And again, please check out my playlist if you have a chance. I'll include the link for it below. You'll be able to again see all the information associated with it, and then also catch up as far as some of the other playlists too. I do add on to it consistently. In fact, I'll be adding this cryptid as well to it very, very soon, and then that way you'll get to see some of the stuff there. One of my favorite traits comments that I hear from people is when they discover my playlist, and then when they do so, they spend a good amount of time catching up on it. They almost like play them back to back to back, and then that's a great way of catching it. I wonder if it's like almost like Netflix, where people are binge watching, like whenever a new season comes out on Netflix of whatever show. I wonder when people discover my playlist, if that's the very same thing, if that's what people do on there. But again, the playlist for the Lumberjack Cryptids will be there, and you'll get to see all my past videos, and they have really good views too, so they still remain very, very popular. That's why I love doing these particular videos here, and then that's why I love enjoying like this one, the Rubberado, which I'll include right into that playlist too. So alright everybody, thanks again as always, and again, any other comments, anything else I might have missed, then please post them below. Alright everybody, have a good day, take care, bye.